Will Florida State slow down a Clemson offense averaging 42 points per game?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Bryant Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk Seminoles football with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, when you place your first $5 bet, you will receive $200 in bonus bets guaranteed for free. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today, we're going to focus on Clemson's offense, which is extremely explosive. Ironic, because I watched quite a bit of Clemson's first game against Georgia, especially in that first half. They struggle bust, and then in the second half, they just look terrible. Since then, it's like a new football team came out there. And while Georgia's got a good defense, it's not a vintage Georgia defense. So I was a little skeptical that Klubnik had really taken a step forward. Boy, was I wrong. There has been a stretch for Clemson this year between two games, mind you, but still two games it is, and the stat doesn't change. 12 consecutive drives with a touchdown. 12. That's more touchdowns than Florida State has scored this year, if I remember correctly. It's pretty close. So that puts things in perspective. They are 42 points per game. If you take out the Georgia game, and like many other teams, they played some directional school, they might be number one in the nation right now in scoring. This is a monumental challenge for Florida State's defense because A, Clemson's good, and B, Florida State's offense is terrible. Defense gets wore down because they're on the field a lot. Doesn't seem like a good matchup, but not all hope is lost. There are a couple of things that I will bring up as the podcast goes along and then summarize at the end to define the best way to at least corral them a little bit. You're not going to completely wipe out Clemson's offense now that it's found its rhythm, but that does not mean it is not infallible. So first off, we're going to go through Cade Klubnik's stats, some of the things that are interesting about him, how he's adapted. And of course, it's ironic. The two quarterbacks playing in this game used to be on the same sideline for Clemson. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. All right, here are the basic numbers for Klubnik so far this year. Again, if you take out the Georgia stats, which I will in a second, it puts it in complete perspective, like how much he's just caught fire. Part of it's the competition, but like his accuracy's changed, etc. So we're going to talk about him with these numbers. 73 of 110, 66.4%, 984 yards, 8.9 yards per attempt. He has 12 touchdowns and 2 picks. So obviously that's pretty good. He was pretty awful at times against Georgia, but they couldn't block them and get open quite as much as they needed to, and they were just out of rhythm. First game of the year, that's not uncommon. Playing Georgia game one is probably not the greatest idea. Here's where it gets really interesting for Klubnik. Twofold. One, he's a guy that not only gets big plays from the running game, they're timely. Like he only runs the ball about 4 times a game, but boy, does he maximize. 17 carries, 106 yards, 4 touchdowns, 6.24 yards per carry. So 2 things with him on this. Number one, they'll run him. The first touchdown, I believe, of the NC State game, they ran some eye candy, like a jet motion or something from right to left. And then he ran off tackle right with a lead blocker. He physically was not touched. Clemson does a really good job of opening things up and finding different ways to get a linebacker or a safety moving out of the direction they need to be in. But there is a responsibility coming across formation. So literally every step you take, your run keys, etc., everybody has to be in sync. It's awful to deal with, but everybody does it. Florida State does too. You must be prepared. NC State, their defense is, if you think Florida State's got problems, go watch NC State. I have no idea what happened to that program, and I've been all over Norvell. Dave Doran's done one of the worst jobs in all of college football this year. So Klubnik and his crew just dismantled NC State. They could have dropped 70 on them. They called the dogs off early, but they just murdered them. And quite frankly, it was basic plays like that. Again, he did not physically get touched. They don't run him a lot, but when they do, he's a gifted athlete. He can really run. He can make a guy miss in the hole, etc. I'm a little bit more worried about him as a runner than a passer because Florida State has a lot of talented DBs. But when he runs, it's inconsistent. You don't know when it's going to happen. And Florida State's got a better pass rush than anybody they faced, including Georgia. I'm just going to say this every week. It seems like I say this. If they let him get outside the pocket every week, Florida State fails at this. But if they let him get outside the pocket or get out of their rush lanes, he will murder them. He doesn't run a lot, but it only takes 1 or 2 plays of like 20 or 30 yards to change a game anyway. Florida State's Achilles heel as a defense is a mobile quarterback. They're terrible against it until otherwise proven. Last week, the quarterback threw the ball well on the run, had a few runs of his own, and he avoided pressure several times. He's a very talented kid, talking about Jennings, and he's an inexperienced guy. Klubnik has played since his freshman year. He is now a junior. This is a vet. He's seen about everything. You're not going to surprise him with much. Breakdown, solid tackles, no kill shots. You have to stay in your rush lanes, even if that means you're less likely to get the sack. You can't just go all out. He'll make you miss. Don't take him for granted. He will embarrass you. He's done it to several teams this year, and the numbers he's putting up are for real. Here's the stats for him passing if you take out the Georgia game. 55 of 81, 67.9%, 842 yards, 10.4 yards per attempt, which is outstanding. 12 touchdowns, only 1 pick. I mean, again, he's on fire. But who is he throwing to and how does it work? This is where it gets really interesting because Florida State, they've got a lot of talented defensive backs. That's not in question. How you cover them and how you change is something I'm going to talk about on and off for the rest of this show because it's going to keep coming back up in how they balance run and pass. That's going to be next here on Locked On Seminoles, and it is an absolutely massive topic. Right back after this. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Clemson will mix it up with their passing game over and over and over. Screens, motions, shifts, different formations, go empty, go running back, go 2 running back. They can do any formation. They are not fun to play. Having stated that, Florida State's already been through this a couple of times. Rhett Lashley last week, tremendous coordinator. Cal's offense is a pain. Florida State has had some really unique offenses to go against. Not fun, but now they're a little more prepared. That should help them. If it doesn't, then this is just another case where you're going to get obliterated because if you get out-leveraged against Clemson, especially if you get Phil Mafah, and I'll talk about him in a moment, coming downhill at you with a blocker in front of him, good luck. You must be, this of all games, elite communication for Florida State is key. They're going to test Florida State, especially the first couple of drives, with every shift, motion, and different formation you can imagine. Why? Florida State is not very good at linebacker right now. They get burned. Some of the plays in the secondary where they've had problems, it's a combination of linebackers and DBs trading off who gets who in coverage when they cross, etc. Run a stack formation. They're going to test Florida State because they failed at it so far this year. That's their bugaboo. They get out of position and give up chunk yardage plays, sometimes in goofy situations. Everything else, they've done pretty good for the most part until this past week against SMU. The last 2 games before that, they did pretty good against the run, but SMU just ran over Florida State. If that happens, and part of it, again, was getting shifted and motioned and all that stuff with Lashley's offense, but Florida State's decent against the run most of the time. I think last week was a little bit of an aberration. Hats off to SMU staff. They won that battle. But I'm more worried about the pass here. Klubnik throwing short passes. They've got one of the best tight ends in college football, Jake Brenningstool. He is the X factor in this game. I'll talk about him a little bit as well. But the key guy, especially if they run him in stack formations or get him the ball as a screen, because this kid is not just fast. He is like the kind of guy that could just, you know what? I'm just going to give up football. I'm just going to go run track and try to make the Olympic team. Bryant Westco. Elite speed. He's only a freshman, but his speed also comes with backed up numbers. How many guys do you know that average 34 yards of reception? Bryant Westco is one of those guys. Not the biggest fella, but he can absolutely fly. And from step one on, he's in full speed. Twitchiness that cannot be taught, the ability to change direction, all of it, he has it. He was a 5-star recruit for a reason. He's out of the Dallas area, if I remember right, but he came all the way from Texas to play for Clemson, and he is the guy that scares me to death. Florida State, I know they got a lot of talent in the secondary, no question. But if you play man-to-man against him, especially if he is lined up off the line of scrimmage, and he will be, he's not going to play split end very much. They're going to keep him off so you can't get hands on him. Good luck if you try to play bump against that. At some point, he's probably going to smoke you. He has that kind of speed. I highly doubt any of Florida State's defensive backs are going to run the 100 in the same kind of time that he is. Elite speed. They're going to test Florida State over the top with him, and they're also going to try to get him on a couple of short passes, probably with a blocker. Not the biggest guy. He certainly needs to add strength in the next year or so. He's pretty thin, probably 175 pounds tops, but you can't tackle what you don't hit. That is the X factor that is in the deep game. And then underneath, if he's not open, again, Jake Brittingstool. He's a tight end that's a very talented guy, 6'5", 6'6", catches everything. He's their second leading receiver overall on the team. And then third, the number one receiver is Antonio Williams. I mean, they've got 3 guys that are good enough to be a number one option for a team. Antonio's got 16 catches, 196 yards, 12.3, and 3 touchdowns. Westco, 7 catches. This number is just ridiculous. 238 yards. Again, 34 yards of reception, 2 scores. And then Brittingstool's got 13 catches. I mean, they're very balanced. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to do it on every play because they will gash you. They have become one of college football's best big play offenses, and I did not see this coming at all. I had no faith in Klubnik after last year. I thought he was terrible. He was as non-clutch as it gets. Well, he's completely done a 180. Congrats to him. I thought coming out of high school, he was going to be this guy. This took him a lot longer than I anticipated, and good for him. But the last piece to this, and it's a little bit of a surprise to me, I think Clemson's offensive line, while not dominant, is a little better than I thought, and that opens up holes for Phil Mafah. He's their 230-pound bruiser, and it also opens up holes for anybody else that runs the ball for them, including, again, Klubnik. And then they've got another guy that's a little bit different, a change of pace player, if you will. He's only a sophomore, and that's sophomore Jay Haynes, 5'11", 195 pounds. He's got 20 carries, 108 yards, 5.4 yards per tote in a score. Mafah has 43 carries, 342 yards, 7.95 yards per carry, and 2 scores. They are a very balanced offense. That's not going to be easy to really take on. The only other thing that I will add about their personnel is they're not afraid to mix it up at all. They've got 6 or 7 receivers that they'll throw to, plus Brittingstool. I believe it's 5 receivers that have over 100 yards receiving so far, so he spreads it out. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a moment, but a couple of quick thoughts. I'm going to ask some questions, what you guys think of trying to slow down Clemson, especially if you've seen them play this year like I have. But one key thing here, if there's a game where Florida State needs, like on short passes, running plays, etc., if you're going to have your best game this year in terms of just tackling and open space, this is the game. Even more so than Miami, believe it or not. The reason is, number one, is Westco. He's that fast. If you miss him, it's over. You can strike up the band. You can walk off the field. Once he gets a lead, it's over. You're not catching him. The other part of that is Klubnik's so good, and he's in such a rhythm, especially on first down. If they get that, everybody wants to get at least 4 yards on first down. Clemson gets 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5. They run a lot of RPO. It's not a whole lot different than what Florida State does. It's just Klubnik's a little more mobile than DJ, to say the least. They just find a way on every single play to find a matchup. They really isolate guys. So if you get the ball out to them, that's one thing. If they catch it, or if there's a little bit of a hole from Mafah or Haynes, whatever, the first guy's got to bring them down. The first guy. Maximizing your opportunities to tackle. Florida State's defense has been up and down in that regard. They got to be lights out against Clemson to have any chance. I mean, absolutely, unequivocally, lights out. Tackling through the ball carrier, no shoulder shots, No just swinging them to the ground, shoulder into the midsection, drive the player to the ground, like 7th grade football. Old school, no doubt about it. They got some skill guys, and I am shocked at how much Clemson's improved from last year to this year. It's night and day. So Florida State better bring their hard hats with that. And when we come back, I'm going to ask a few questions, give some of my own thoughts on how to slow down Clemson's offense. And then secondly, going to kind of give an idea of what is going to happen if they don't, especially early in the game. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. Have you checked out the Gametime app yet? It is the best way for you to find tickets to just about any event that you would want to go to. It's ironic. The Major League Baseball playoffs are starting. Games across the country from LA to New York. You can go down south. Atlanta's got the playoff game, etc. You have all kinds of opportunities. I'm a baseball guy. One of my big goals in life is to go to not just a playoff game, but a really cool one. This year, there's some pretty interesting matchups, including the wild cards, and you could be at one of those games. All you have to do is download the app, create an account, and figure it out for yourself. What game you want to go to? Type in Detroit Tigers, type in Atlanta Braves, whatever it may be. You could be at that game. And here's the cool part, the part I like about the app. Once you pick a game, you can click on a seat, and it will show you that seat to the pitcher's mound, that seat to the stage. It's not just sports. It could be a theater. It could be going to a movie. It could be a concert like Metallica or anything else. You have an opportunity to pick what you want. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. How does Florida State slow down Clemson's offense? I just went over all the players they have, and they're impressive. Their O-line's usually their Achilles. It's pretty good, too. It's not dominant, and it's certainly their weakest position, but they got some guys that are pretty good up front, and they've got good chemistry. It doesn't look good on the outside looking in, but there are a couple of things. I want to lead off with this. Can Florida State get at least 3 sacks? Notice that I said at least. A few weeks ago, they had 7. I'm not saying they're getting 7 against Clemson. However, this is twofold. Excuse me. Number one, Klubnik has a little bit of a gunslinger mentality. I know he's only got 2 picks this year, but when he's under duress, sometimes he reverts back. And what I mean by that is, oh, you're not going to sack me. I'm going to just throw it. Sometimes getting the sack is not the best thing. Sometimes the best thing is absolutely unequivocally making him feel under duress, but he thinks he can get it off. Let him throw it up in the air with off balance. That's when you can take one back. I've been saying this for about 3 weeks. Florida State is due for a defensive touchdown. For the love of mankind, would they desperately need one against Clemson? Why not? Klubnik has a history of catastrophic plays. Make him think the play through in a split second. It's very hard to do, and make the right decision. Either take the sack or throw it away. Sometimes he'll throw it up. That's one. Excuse me. Number 2, every now and then he's just going to go backwards, defiant, and again, not throwing it away or what have you. You might get a sack for 25-yard loss. You can create a play like that. He's very stubborn. That's just his nature. If you can get him for a big play like that, you can change the field position on a sack. He's that guy who'll zigzag and try to go around. Florida State's defensive front's pretty athletic. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like Jones or somebody else, maybe it's Patrick Payton, ends up sacking him for an 18-yard loss or something. That's okay. If you don't get the pick, that's one thing. If you get the sack, it's still great. Change the field. Let him be an idiot if he wants to be one. He may not do this, but he'll try to get away. I don't think he'll throw it away quite as quickly as he should. And there's also a chance of a strip sack fumble in that scenario. Again, giving you a chance at a scoop and score. Florida State is due for one of those. So with that said, here are the questions that I have. And I'm curious if you're on YouTube, please comment on these. Can Florida State slow down Clemson's rushing attack? To beat Clemson, yeah, you got to slow down Klubnik, but he's going to make some plays. There is no defense for the perfect pass. At any level, at any time in history, perfect pass is the perfect pass. He's going to make a few of those. Run gap fits are run gap fits. They're also never going to change. Florida State has too many great plays followed by what was that with their run defense. Case in point, SMU. Terrible tackling. Not bad. Not bad. Terrible against an elite athlete at running back. And well, actually a couple of guys. They were really good. Their star running back, Brayshard, was out for part of the game. And Florida State still got run over. Terrible run gap fits, poor tackling, and quite honestly, just bad anticipation on cutting off the edge against a speed runner. Those don't make any sense. None of that can happen. So can they slow him down? Mafah is a different kind of back. He's certainly not as fast as Brayshard. And he's the guy that will try to run you over. Two things here. You don't have to worry him running around the end quite as much. He can run, but not like Brayshard Smith. And two, if you don't break down and tackle as big as he is, he will just crush you. That is one of the strongest running backs in college football, but it's a power matchup. This game, with him in the run game, Clemson's going to come right at you. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Their offense is pretty straightforward with that because this guy is a sledgehammer. Are you going to be ready for him? You better be. You better get off the ball right now because if you're still engaged with an offensive lineman, he's coming by, arm tackle ain't going to work. You got to put a shoulder pad in the middle of his chest, hold on for dear life, and wait for your friends to come and join the party. Got to hit him early. Number two, how many sacks and tackles for loss? I brought this up in the last part of the show. I'm going to guess they get 3, but they really need 5 or 6. I mean, I know that's a high order, but if it's not 5 or 6, it could be like 4 with a couple of picks based on what I said a few minutes ago. I think Klubnik is due for a boneheaded play. Maybe Florida State's the one that baits him into it. A lot of pressure. He throws the ball like jumping off 1 foot or something, just dumb as all get out. Every now and then he'll make that kind of play. He might complete it too. He's a great athlete. But I'd rather see him trying to do that than sitting in the pocket, having nobody around his feet, and stepping into his throw with a rhythm. When he's doing that, you're in deep, deep trouble. So minimum 3 sacks for Florida State, or they're not winning this game. Minimum. And there needs to be constant pressure. With 4, by the way, we'll be very specific here. If Florida State has to blitz to beat Clemson, this game will be over by halftime. Front 4 must get constant pressure with 4. I know that's hard, but Clemson's skill is way too good to be rushing 5 and 6 on every play. Got to get home with 4. If not, this game will be over by halftime. Number 3. This is the one that is very concerning, and I've kind of hinted at it throughout the show. Linebackers and secondary. Clemson's going to run a gazillion different shifts, a gazillion different formations, guys coming across, stopping and start, running back around the running back. If the linebackers and DBs are not 100% in sync with who's got who, even when everybody's running around and it's a Chinese fire drill for Clemson will light up that scoreboard because there'll be guys running down the field scot-free. Florida State has struggled mightily with this. The coaches and players are foul. Not one or the other, both. You cannot be in a position to give Clemson freebies. They will beat you one-on-one if you know it. Like if you gave them the play, they're still good enough with their speed and talent to hit some plays. They really are. You cannot give them freebies. The switches, lining it up in stack or different like triangle formations, everybody doing rub routes, Clemson's good at it. They're really good at it, especially to the perimeter to the right side because Klubnik's right-handed. Sprint out, throw it to Brenningstool. If you don't get to the outside and he gets ahead of steam, good luck to the DB. It's got to tackle that giant. They will kill you with basic 4-yard passes and get 15, 20 yards. You must communicate and be ready for every formation. This is a very difficult week for Florida State overall. Finally, I talked about this a little bit during the show. I think the minimum number that Florida State needs to win this game is to be up 3-0. I mean, if it's 4-1 or whatever, but to be up 3 turnovers on Clemson. Because I think Clemson's way better than Florida State, which I'm sure most of you do too. At minimum, I think they need to be +3 in turnovers. Here's the problem with that. To date, there are 134 teams in the FBS. How many teams do you think Florida State is better than? Well, that's 20 because they're 114th in turnovers, while Clemson is 7th. If they don't flip that script against a team that's lighting up the scoreboard, averaging 42, while Florida State averages, well, just over 15, Yeah, it's not going to go well. They must get easy scores, probably need at least one defensive and or special teams play to be in this game. Clemson should win this game by double digits, by all accounts from what we've seen this year. To beat a team that's much better than you, at least to this point in the season, you got to flip the script on something. Why not turnovers? That's the easiest way to do it. Add in a little better run defense than what you played against SMU would be nice, and it would probably give you more chances. But again, if a ball comes to a DB or to a linebacker or there's a deflection, there can be zero drops. Any chance at a fumble, a guy can't muff it. They've got to get it. This is a very thin pattern here. You've got to go right down the middle here. The thin line that you're playing for with turnovers and to get to the winner circle against Clemson is so fine, it's hard to even put into words. There can be no mistakes when an opportunity is there. With that, thank you very much once again for checking out Locked On Seminoles. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Please hit that like button, hit that notification bell, and come back and see us again tomorrow. I'm going to talk a little more Clemson. We're going to talk about their defense, some of the things that Florida State needs to do to at least show some signs of consistency on offense. Seems like every time you think something's getting ready to happen, it goes away. They had the touchdown start the game against SMU. Looked pretty good. But then they only scored 9 more points the rest of the game. So with that, thank you once again for coming in to check us out. We will see you again on Wednesday.